It is now my great privilege to ask our folks to come on the stage. Helen and Keith, take your seats whichever way you feel comfortable. My job is to introduce Helen Miller, who is on the board of directors of the Center for Policy Alternatives. She is a state representative from the great state of Iowa. And for those of you who have been following recent history, you know that Iowa went from being a legislature that had both its bodies, well, the Senate was tied and the House was controlled by the Republicans, and now both houses are controlled by the Democrats, and they have a new Democratic governor, and Mr. Culver. So Helen is riding high, and she is a majority whip, an assistant majority whip, and she is from Fort Dodge, Iowa. She is on our board of directors. She serves the people of her district well, and she will introduce or have our guest introduce himself, who actually needs no introduction. So with that, I'll turn it over to Helen Miller. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm really excited to have this chance to be here with our special guest and with all of you. As you can see, I have recent articles about this gentleman. He's quite the newsmaker, and I didn't know a lot about him except that I knew he was a Fleming Fellow this year, and having graduated from Center for Policy Alternatives Fleming Leadership Program, I'm going to make the great assumption that I probably have a lot in common with Keith Ellison, and if I don't have enough, I'm certainly going to aspire to have even more in common with him. And so I am really pleased to be the moderator for this event this afternoon. The way I thought I'd get started was just to do a little bit of an introduction, talk a little bit about Keith's background. And of course, we all know that he is the congressman-elect from the great state of Minnesota. And so there's a lot to talk about. I just want to get some things out there and kind of lay a little bit of a framework. And then I want to ask Keith a few questions myself. And then, of course, I am not going to hog up all the time, even though I could with lots and lots of questions that I have. But I'm going to invite all of us to get engaged. And Keith has assured me that I should assure you that there is no question that you cannot ask. He's perfectly willing, able to answer any questions that you have. But I want to get us started here, and so I'm just going to take a quick second here to just let you know that Keith was born in Detroit, Michigan, moved to the great state of Minnesota to go to law school back in '87, I think it was.
That's right.
He's married. He has 4 children. He was elected to the House of Representatives in the state of Minnesota back in 2002.
That's right.
And he served the 58th House District there since that time, and he has just been elected this past year, this last month, to the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives. Now, I know you've been reading lots and lots of things, but before we get into all those news-making things, the first thing I want to do is to ask Keith a question as relates to the Center for Policy Alternatives. And I'm really curious to know, the Fleming Institute here at the CPA has a values-based leadership program, and I'd just like to know what, if any, impact being a part of that program perhaps had on you and your decision to run and how you ran and the result.
Well, let me tell you, CPA and Fleming has had a very enriching experience on me. I mean, I really feel that the Fleming program is extremely valuable. It's one of the best things I've ever done to help enhance my leadership skills. And I'm really proud to be part of the class of '06. Yeah. And I would recommend it to anybody. And I just really believe that all of us who have been able to be within the reach of the Center for Policy Alternatives need to reach out even more to let other people participate in this great experience we've had, because it's the kind of thing that we really have a duty to share because it just is that good of a program. And again, the values base is really where it's at these days. You know, the truth is, as proud as I am to be a member of the Democratic Party and the DFL from Minnesota, really parties are vehicles to take people from one place to another, from where they are to a place of prosperity, human rights, or what have you. Parties should serve our values. We should not serve the party. The party should serve us. And I think that to put a values focus on our political service and our public service is really where it's at, and it's really where most Americans, I think, are going. So I'm really happy to be connected to that values-based leadership style.
Now, you had a bit of a background before you came to us here at CPA, so want to talk a little bit about your family background and maybe how some of that was instilled in you?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in the city of Detroit. Both my parents are Southerners from Georgia and Louisiana. That experience that they had a huge impact on me growing up. I grew up in the city, but I feel a very strong, close kinship to rural America. I have close relatives on the farm right now. But again, you know, I did have that urban experience, and I am an urban person to a large extent, and therefore care deeply about what happens in the urban centers of our nation. You know, I grew up in a household where civil rights and opportunity were common topics of conversation. You know, my grandfather was organizing black voters in Louisiana in the 1950s, in the pre-Brown era, and was often, according to my mother and my grandmother, the target of death threats, and they would pull trees out on the old roads in the piney woods of Louisiana to make them get out of the car, so they'd have to, you know, move the trees, and, you know, often didn't know whether they were going to make it back to the car or not. Many had, you know, like I said, threats, burning crosses. And so this is the part, I mean, it was a traumatizing experience for my mother, and it was a therapeutic experience for her to talk to us about it. And we needed to know, you know, so often we want to protect our kids from those ugly things, but we need to know, because it bothers our ancestors and our parents, you know, the things that they went through, but sometimes we don't know what's bothering them.
Right.
And so to grow up hearing about the struggles for equality and to make our country more democratic were good for my parents, good for us kids too. I come from a family of five boys, no sisters. My sisters-in-law are my sisters now, and so they keep me honest, you know. And so, you know, and I have, and two of my brothers are in Detroit. The rest of us have gone far and wide. Got one brother in Boston, another in North Carolina. For 16 years, I've been a trial lawyer. First 3 years of my practice, I was in the 42nd floor of the IDS Center in Minneapolis. I was 25 years old, and I had a legal assistant who was twice my age, and they told her to call me Mr. Ellison, and they told her me to call her by her first name. That was pretty bizarre experience for me, and so we immediately broke down those artificial barriers. But being in that firm, and I enjoyed it. I was very well treated, got to work on some good cases, but 90% of the time I spent was regular commercial litigation, rich folks fighting over money. And it really wasn't what I even ever went to law school for, even though the work was good, honorable, and I was well treated. So I got an opportunity to be the executive director of the Legal Rights Center, indigent legal services for people. Did that for 5 years, helped make sure that the Constitution was real for everybody, and enjoyed doing that. And if it weren't for the low pay and all the babies that kept coming, I still could be doing it. But my wife, who's a school teacher, said, "Hey, man, you got to make some more money." And so I started in my own legal office in '98. And but I also stayed really involved in community stuff. Did community public radio for about 8 years, where I hosted a show in KMOJ Radio, and was involved in all manner of community activities, whether it was from making sure that juries accurately represented all the people in the community, or whether it was housing issues or just a whole range of things. And I really was operating under the philosophy that politicians see the light when they feel the heat. They're basically replaceable between one and another. Who's in office doesn't matter. The people mobilizing and putting pressure on politicians is what really makes social change. Until I found out that I was probably wrong about that. And I saw a model of a politician who was truly a civil rights community organizer who actually ran for office and won. That man's name was Senator Paul Wellstone.
Yes.
And helped. And so sometime around 96, 97, I began to really hear the call of, I saw the example of Paul Wellstone. I heard, remember what things that my father used to say, like, any jackass can kick down a barn, but it takes a carpenter to build one. And so you can complain about social conditions, or you can go do something about it. It's harder to do something about it than to just point out the problem. But, we all have a duty obligation. Maybe it was because I saw my children growing up and felt that I had a duty to make a better world for them, not just to talk about how bad the one we had was. And, but for one reason or another, I just felt like instead of being protest-oriented, I needed to refocus in terms of constructing a better world. And so I ended up running for office. I felt that was a good way to do it. And got in office in 2002 and loved every minute of the service I had in the Minnesota State Legislature. Really feel, even though I ran for Congress, I feel the real action is at the state level. I feel that at the federal level, it's important to just create an environment so that state legislators can pass laws that make sense, and also to focus on national policy where we really need national policy. For example, I think it's one of the problems in our country is that we have this patchwork of voting qualifications all over every state. I personally think that wouldn't it be nice if we had some basic requirements? We said, look, in America, there are no lifetime bans on voting, whether you have a felony or not. That should be something that the feds say, this, you can do what you want to do, but there's no lifetime bans, right? We should say in America, that we're going to have audits and paper trails to make sure that the integrity of every election is ensured for all people. And so I ran for federal office because I think there should be some basic bottom line things that every state should have to do so that no state can be in the business of disenfranchising voters and treating people so wildly differently from one state to another. So that's probably a long-winded answer to a pretty short question.
No, because I would have just jumped right in and asked that anyway, and so you answered it already.
Right.
Now what I think we all want to know is how you got into running for Congress. I think we have a little bit of the background, and what were the issues that...
Well, let me tell you, going
really
back to this values issue, I believe that a caring, loving nation should ensure the health of all of its people. To me, that means national health insurance. That's what that translates to. And I don't think that our health should turn on where we live. It should turn on our status as residents of this great country. And of course, the war was probably the most prominent issue in my mind. I don't believe there's a worse disaster in public policy in American history than the Iraq War. And so I felt as though, and again, whether you're talking about the 2,900 Americans who've lost their lives, or the over 20,000 Americans who are injured, or the over 600,000 Iraqis who've lost their lives, or the massive destruction of Iraq and its infrastructure, or the environmental implications of this war, or whether the drain on the American budget, $8 billion a month we send over there, while we leave 47 million Americans with the uninsured. While we're seeing Pell Grant program cut, while we're seeing so many other human needs go unmet, I just felt, and while we're seeing a corrosive effect on our civil and human rights, passage of stuff like the Military Commissions Act, depriving people of the right to challenge their detention, all these kind of things, and I just felt like, gotta say something about it. So all these things were on my mind in March of 2006. I was just going along, minding my own business, being a state legislator, and all of a sudden I get a call, hey, the congressman of 28 years is going to take his richly deserved retirement. And what are you going to do? Because if you wait around, you just don't know what's going to happen. You better jump in this thing quick if you want to do it. Called Kim. We talked about it. Talked to some other friends. And by around noon, I was in. And I really didn't know I really didn't know whether what was going to happen. I figured that we were going to definitely talk about Iraq. We're going to talk about the uninsured. We're going to talk about the middle class squeeze. We're going to raise these issues, and the chips are going to fall where they fall. I was happy to go back to the Minnesota legislature. As I mentioned before, I love serving in the legislature. And so, I was happy to do that. 12 people entered the race. When they had our first televised, quote-unquote, debate, they needed these small bleachers to actually have all of us there to discuss the issues. And, we all, talked about the issues from our own perspective. Some people thought, stay the course. Other people thought, the Iraq's not the issue, but that, stem cell research, a very important issue, by the way, was the issue, but we just disagreed on priority. And 12 people entered the race. In Minnesota, we have a endorsing process. We have something called the DFL, that's Minnesotan for Democrat, right? And so we had about 7 weeks from March to May, mad dash to get the endorsement. Because there were so many people in the endorsing convention, the conventional wisdom was that nobody's going to win. There's going to be no endorsement because you got to get 60% to win an endorsement. On the first ballot, I had twice as many delegates as the second place finisher. On the second one, we went up. On the third one, the second place person said, hey, look, let's endorse Keith by unanimous consent. So we won. And we thought it was going to be all day.
It wasn't.
What we thought was going to be an all-day and maybe even all-night affair, and endorsing conventions in Minnesota have gone like 24 hours, and we ended up out of there by around 2:30.
Wow.
And so it was amazing, and it was wonderful. I was walking on air. We had all faiths, all colors, all cultures pulled together in unity around a progressive agenda that was based on values, and we swept it. And we didn't say anything bad about anybody. We talked about what vision we had for the country. When I say we, I'm not just using the imperial we. I mean we, our group that I was simply just, like the brand name for. But we had a rough summer though, nobody's perfect, and that goes double for me. And a lot of the things, that I had made mistakes on in the past came out. And some things I didn't do at all came out, and throughout the course of the summer, that was a character building exercise, But we made a very early commitment to the fact that we don't engage in negative campaigning, no matter what they.
Good for you.
And we made a very early commitment to the fact that if we believe, and our slogan was everybody counts, everybody matters, everybody counts, everybody matters. If we believe everybody counts and everybody matters, that can't simply be our policy focus. That has to be the way we run the campaign. So we're not against television. In this race, we just didn't buy any. We did it all through mail and through door knocking. We had 2,508 volunteers on primary day. And we made 90,000 calls. We did 37,000 door knocks within 3 days, and we just went nuts on the field program. Yeah. And the campaign, of course, was a beautiful mixture of all God's people, and it was wonderful. And so we had a tough July. We had a great June, tough July, better August. Fabulous September, and then on September 12th, we had a victory party in which I kid you not, we had millionaires hugging homeless people, both working on the campaign. We had Muslim, Christian, Jew. We had Hindu, Buddhist. We had blacks, whites, Latinos. We had people from the Middle East. We had the whole mosaic of what America really is, all participating in this campaign, and every one of them. Even the fancy trial lawyers who I've made friends with in my work as trial lawyer, taking off their ties and their monogrammed shirts to go out and knock some doors. And I told them it's good for you to do that, and they were happy. And they found out that it was actually pretty fun, and they got, as trial lawyers do, got competitive about who was going to get more people to get out and vote. And we have a same-day voter registration. So in Minnesota, you can literally drive right up to a corner, say, hey, did you guys vote today? Make sure they go to the right precinct, and they can vote. And so we really did that, and we really believed that part of one of our mission was to expand the electorate. And I'll say this, that we had a poll in around July, and the pollster said, look here, Keith, if you don't, you got 6 people in this race, if you don't expand the electorate, it's touch and go. I mean, the party endorsement is going to definitely help you, but you got a lot of people who are in the race. One of them is, there's one person who was the only suburbanite. They thought they could really, and we don't have a runoff state, so whoever gets the most wins. You don't have to have a majority. So we went out, and the pollster said, you may win if you don't expand the electorate, and you may well not win, and so you better get about the business of getting at least 10,000 brand new voters who don't vote in the primary. Wow. So we went to campus. We went to immigrant communities. We went to communities of color. We went to a community a lot of people don't think of, but in Minnesota ended up being a big community, which is the peace and justice community. Mm-hmm. These folks are the folks who are going to vote for, Kucinich and Dean, and who always kind of feel like, wow, we back this person who holds up our ideals, but doesn't win. You all know those kind of voters, right?
Yes.
Maybe we are some of those kind of voters. But we said, look, here's a campaign you can get with because, Keith has authentic credentials in opposing this war, And so we got a lot of them, and they're pretty well organized in Minnesota. And we went to the GBLT community, new immigrant community, and we went to just the plain old, liberal white Minnesota voter, because that's who lives in Minnesota, And we convinced them that, hey, we're all in this thing together. If we work together, we can improve our district and our country. And we pulled it out in the primary. We got 41%, 31%. We got 41. The next person got 31. The next person got 21. And in Minnesota, that was a pretty good turnout for us. We won by 10 points, and we're pretty encouraged to do that. Labor was out of control for us. In the poll, they told us that labor households were not supporting us, even though we got endorsements by the union. And so labor went out and told the folks, hey, look, this is the agenda that, this guy is talking about. This is his track record with us in the state legislature. And it ended up being okay. But in the beginning, we were real concerned about getting some of those, labor households. We were doing poorly among white suburban males. So we went out to the suburbs and knocked the doors and talked to them about a working class, economic, bread and butter agenda, about, all these real regular issues that we all are so concerned about, and that really unite everybody. And we were able to really pull in those union households too. So that's kind of how it went. And then after the primary, which was a wonderful win, of course, it wasn't over. People thought, oh, it's over. Well, it wasn't over, because after that, we had some truly scurrilous defamatory attacks. And but we didn't react to those either, and we said, look, we want to prove that you can run a clean campaign and you can win a clean campaign, and you don't have to go negative to win, because a lot of people, well-meaning candidates believe, well, you got to go negative. Even though I really don't want to go negative, you got to go negative. And if you look at the numbers, I think that the ratio from positive vision-based TV ads to negative TV ads was about 10 to 1. I mean, somebody correct me, please. But I saw the numbers on television one day, and they were vastly disproportionate. We're feeding the community this stuff. And let me just say this, and I know I said this is my last point, but I want to say that think about negative campaigning this way. If I say, for example, Representative Miller and I are in a race, and if I go negative on her, the people who were thinking about voting for her, they're not going to now vote for me. They're not going to say, we liked her, but we heard that, I don't know, her grass was too high or something, and now we're going to vote for you. They're not going to do that. What they're going to do is simply not vote at all. They're going to stay out. Negative campaigning is not a vote, is not offering choices. It is a voter suppression strategy. Now, what is the morality, and yes, I use the M word, of trying to persuade somebody to leave their franchise on the table, right? What is the morality of that? You know? See, we have a First Amendment to the Constitution because we have a free press. It's the press's job to bring out those things about me or any one of us that the voters need to know. But it isn't my job to try to besmirch the reputation of somebody who's simply offering leadership in our community so that I can benefit from ruining their reputation. I think there are moral dimensions to negative campaigning, and I just want to say that.
Speaking of that, and I think this leads us into our last question from me,
Yeah.
and then we're going to open it up to you. And that relates to all of these articles in the press where they've been talking about your faith and the issues that they think surround that. Would you
Right.
comment on that for us?
Well, you know, I got to tell you guys a secret. I want you to keep it to yourselves, okay? I'm a Muslim. Salaam alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
You know, and I tell you, you know, it's funny. I say, you know, you say salam alaikum, but I could easily have said shalom. It means the same thing. Peace means the same thing. By many names, you know, we refer to each other, and by many names we refer to the divine. But you know, it's funny, and it's funny. Karen Clark, who's a legislator of many distinguished years in Minnesota, she had to go catch her plane. But she can tell you that everybody in Minnesota knows and has known that I was a Muslim ever since before I got to the legislature. It was not a secret. I actually held Muslim Day on the Hill twice, invited the Speaker and the Attorney General to address the people who showed up, just as a way to try to integrate a community into the body politic, include more people, put water in the stew, expand the base, right? It's what we all should be trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it was never a problem. In this election, it became this huge problem. And in the beginning, I said, you know what? I mean, I got to the position to be a credible congressional candidate without ever talking about my own personal religion. And so I didn't really want to talk about religion because I didn't jump into the race to talk about religion. Right. I believe in the separation of church and state because I believe that if the state has no religion and it's neutral ground, it frees us all to practice as we see fit. If we, you know, I mean, you know, the religious diversity is a wonderful strength of this country. We should never, and you know, because think about it. Let's just say America was a quote unquote, you know, not quote unquote, but let's just say it was a Christian nation as some people propose. And I think there's a wonderful diversity in the Christian community itself. Which branch of Christianity, Baptist or Methodist or which one, right? Right. There's an endless permutation and combinations. And the fact is that we all should be free to seek the divine or not too as part of it. And so in the beginning, I didn't really want to go there with my own faith. It's deeply personal, didn't want to talk about it. But the question came up so much that I knew that that simply wasn't an option. I had to find a way to talk about faith and values and even religion in a way that built bridges and not walls. See, my opponents wanted me to talk about being a Muslim all the time because it's distancing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, I don't know what that's about. I heard bad things about them people. And so I needed to find a language to talk about faith because I was confronted with it. Not talking about it, trust me, got to be not an option in a way that people understood. So I started saying, you know what, you know, yeah, I'm a Muslim, but, you know, I'm running to talk about things that connect us all, that bring us together, things that no matter what faith you belong to, they're universal in orientation. You know, so there was a few times I had to say, you know, look, you know, I went to a Seder and I heard that, don't reject the stranger because once you were the stranger. And this is something that's a part of the Judaic belief system, but it resonated with me. And it resonated with my Christian brothers and sisters, and it resonated with people who don't go to church, mosque, or synagogue. And so I began to really talk in terms of values that connect us. Here's what connects us. Peace connects us, right? We all want peace, even in cases where, people feel they must defend themselves. Peace is always preferred, right? What else connects us? Health and wellness connects us, right? What else connects us? Well, a laborer is worth their hire. That's in the Bible, isn't that, Mr. Terry? So, that connects us. Fair wages is not just an economic principle. It's a religious idea. It's a value that we can rely on. And so I just talked about those things, talked about how, in the Muslim tradition, we say that humanity is the Khalifa of the earth. Well, what does Khalifa mean? It means trustee. It means that it's not ours, but we're in charge of it, and we're responsible to take care of it. And that is the idea that whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Baha'i, whatever, people were feeling that. So I began to talk about faith and values that way, and what felt like an isolating, polarizing, distancing thing back in June ended up being something that really, I felt connection, I felt unity, I felt a part of these body of people of faith and people who don't go to church or celebrate or worship any deity, and it began to be sort of a bridge builder as opposed to a wall. So, so then the Quran thing shows up. Of course, we always had the lunatic fringe out there, right? Now, when I say that about them, here's the deal. Fear is reality, right? We all experience it. And what does fear look like manifested in public policy, right? What it looks like manifested as public policy is we need a lot of guns and bombs. We need walls, right? We need to count people out. We need to say they're not amongst us. We can only look out for ourselves. We fear scarcity, so we say there's not enough, right? These are the politics of fear. And when you have a fear-based politics, you need a leader who is authoritarian, probably male, tough guy, talks tough, says stuff like, we got a saying in Texas or maybe in Arkansas that fool me, don't fool me again. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
So you need leadership that is like that because the politics are fear-based. But what about this idea that is universal among faith, of faith that the divine is going to provide and keep us and will be, you understand what I'm saying? This idea of the loaves and the fishes, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? 5,000 people showed up, right, to hear Jesus talk, right? And they didn't count the women, right? So you probably had about, and you probably had 20,000 people, a lot of people, right? And you just had these few loaves and fishes, right? And yet all the people were full. Now Jesus and God, they don't do magic tricks, right? So the story is to demonstrate a point. What point? There's enough. There's enough. There is abundance, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have to hoard. We don't have to fence, right? Mm-hmm. We don't need to get a bunch of bombs and guns. We need to share. What really happened? Was it a miracle? Or here's an interesting take on it. Did the 5,000 say, there's only a few loaves and fishes up there. Let me go back to where I'm my village and get some more food. Charity, generosity. Or was it that their perception was that there wasn't enough? Much like today, our perception is that there's not enough. We can't increase the minimum wage because that's going to drive up the cost of labor and more people. That's the politics of there's not enough. Mm-hmm. There's always enough for the CEOs.
Yes.
Yes,
indeed.
Poverty's increased for the last 6 years. The ranks of the uninsured have increased for the last 6 years, and executive pay has increased for the last 6 years. Mm-hmm. And so we need a new politics of sharing, a new politics of there is enough. a new politics of courage based on your unshakable belief that the divine is looking out for you. So that's what I got to say about that.
I must say that based upon those marvelous responses, I must have asked some really good questions. But I am going to stop here and let everyone else who's interested in getting in on this take this opportunity to ask Congressman-elect Keith Ellison of Minnesota any questions you feel like answering.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, Adam Eben from Virginia. Keith, we got to hear your values and the great values that you must take from your faith, but Rush Limbaugh and some others, I think maybe they weren't listening to you or they heard some other story, because I understand that on right-wing talk radio, they started a whole story about what you were going to do when you took your oath of office, and I thought that when the members take their official oath, they don't use a Bible of any kind necessarily. Could you tell us a little bit about if you reacted to it at all, if you want to comment on it, or where you think it might have originated, perhaps?
Well, let me tell you, back before even the primary election, there was a Somali journalist who had a cable show, and the Somali journalist asked me, hey, when you get sworn in, are you going to use a Quran? The Somalis are like 100% Muslim, right? And they're excited about the campaign, and who can really blame them? Everybody wants to see themselves reflected in government, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, you know what? We haven't even won yet. I don't know. I haven't thought about swearing in. I'm thinking about knocking on some doors and making some calls. And I said, well, okay, so assuming you win, will you use the Quran? I said, well, I don't even know what the procedure is. I said, well, assuming you win and assuming the procedure calls for a book of some kind, will you use the Quran? And I said, oh, sure. Why wouldn't I? Sure. This is a long time ago. This is before the election. Next thing I know, the right-wing radio is making a huge deal out of this. None of them have gotten a quote from me. You haven't, and all this stuff you've heard about the Quran, you haven't heard my take on it, because I really, see, this is something that caught me by surprise. I did not know that there is a branch out there that can simply take an issue and fly with it, and that you, the subject of their conversation, can have nothing to do with it. And I haven't commented on it. I didn't want to go on their show and debate them because I just didn't see the point. I don't know if there will come a time when I need to. I really would like to simply move on, I can tell you this, I'm not a Muslim scholar and I'm not a Muslim leader. I'm just trying to keep up with my prayers and go on Friday. That's pretty much what it is for me. And so I don't want to be thrust into the role of the Muslim expert. There's people who know much more about it than I do. And, there are people who attend university, much the same way a person would go to rabbinical school or to the seminary. And so I'm not about to jump into their role, But let me just say that, it has sparked an interesting debate, Yes. And an interesting conversation. People, without my involvement, have said things like, well, wait a minute, what does the Constitution really say? Doesn't it say that, Congress shall make no law establishing a state church? Doesn't the Constitution say that there are no religious tests for elected office? Yeah, I guess it does say that. Well, maybe it's a beautiful thing, maybe, that all faiths, all colors, all cultures can come to America, swear to uphold one Constitution. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a strength. Maybe that's a beautiful thing. Maybe that's something we should celebrate. Maybe that's something that doesn't happen everywhere on the globe. And for all, and even though we've seen in America, we've seen slavery, Jim Crow, sexism, Japanese internment, maybe, despite all those things we've had to overcome, this place in general does tend toward justice, does tend toward inclusion, does tend toward, a noble ideal that we all need to strive for and is worthy. And so it has sparked this interesting conversation. And for that, I'm grateful. But, I can't claim that it wasn't frustrating along the way.
Excuse me
David
one
Haley.
second. Make sure you identify yourself.
David Haley from Kansas. And
There's two mics.
just wanted to say thank you again, Keith. We're incredibly proud of you from this
Thank you, brother.
organization. And as we look at the momentum that we garnered here in the midterm elections, I appreciate some of the vision that you've brought, some of the issues you've talked about. But in what way do you foresee in the next 2 years progressives can continue to garner the spirit that's across this country, to move the country ahead as we move toward a very important 2008 election? In which ways do you see, or will you see as a new member of Congress, that we can help shape the agenda in the 2008 and beyond? Just kind of interested in some of the issues that you foresee that we would do.
Well, Senator Haley, thank you for the question. Of course, I'm going to thank you for allowing me to answer that question, because everybody in this room could answer that question. And I think the point is that it's going to take us all to move forward a progressive agenda. And this is the day that Messianic leadership is done. There's no great man, usually it's a man, right, who's going to lead us out, nor will there be a group of elected officials. It is going to take us all to press the progressive agenda. That has to start on the grassroots level and has to work its way up. I will tell you that I am very, very encouraged. In my opinion, Nancy Pelosi is a true progressive. She is talking about the things that I care about, and I know many of you care about, and that's good, because I really didn't want to go into a Congress where we're going to have to start out trying to convince the leadership that maybe that we ought to increase the minimum wage, since it hadn't been increased since '97. You know what I mean? We didn't have to convince the leadership that this war was cancer. She's there, she's leading the band. And so I'm real proud of her and glad that she is keeping it hot. But I can tell you that she can't do it alone. She needs us organizing community meetings on the grassroots level. She needs us getting our own voice up on the radio. These people don't have any monopoly on the radio, right? We need to be writing our own stuff. We need to be messaging. We have to be thinking creatively about how do you convince people that a voter ID requirement is a bad thing? How do you do that? Since so many middle-class people use IDs every day, how do we think creatively about how to do that? I know we've done some stuff on that. How do we talk about these things? I'll also, let me just say this too, Senator, that I think that, CPA and Fleming program create an avenue for us to network and get to know each other so we can share and trade ideas. It's very important part of what is going on here. And I also want to say, and this is maybe my most important point, we got to be bold, right? The American people said, the American people on November 7th, it was expressed as a vote for a lot of Democrats, but in my opinion, it was really a vote for progressive values. They've seen the politics of fear. They've seen people who are so afraid that they need a bunch of bombs and guns and an enormous military budget just to make themselves feel safe, and they still don't feel safe. They've seen what that does, what that is. They've seen it, and they don't like it. And they're counting on me and you and all of us to make a change. So we got to be bold. We got to listen to the people. I saw a poll today that said that about 75% of the people believe that dealing with this healthcare crisis is very important. Mm-hmm. Now, we can't say, well, wait a minute, 75% of the people may find it important, but you know what? The big insurance companies, they don't really want to change. They like it how it is. And since they're the ones who give campaign donations, maybe we just got to, live with it. We can't do that, We got to be bold. We got to make change. We got to be willing to run some risks. We got to be mindful and thoughtful, right? We can't be reckless, but we got to put forth a progressive agenda unapologetically. We have got to say that the public good, that the common good is a good idea, and that private gain for the privileged few is not a good idea for the rest of us.
Good afternoon. State Representative Roberta Abdul Salam, and I greet you in the words, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I really am humbled by this experience. First of all, when I ran for office, after I got over the people requesting that I change my name, they thought I'd have a better chance of winning if I changed my name from Abdul Salam and used my maiden name, which was Thomas. The other thing was that, in the end, my Muslim name, as people would say, oh, that's a Muslim name. And I said, no, that's an Arabic name. I understand that there were so many people that voted for the name, they didn't know me. They just knew that with the name Abdul Salam, I would be different. And that came from little old Caucasian women, and it came from militant black folk, and it came from the upper crust of Fayette County, you know, because they thought this would be a change. Now, I've been labeled the first Muslim name to be elected in the country. That's, you know, I got so many calls, there was so much press. But the interesting thing was that when there was a announced Muslim running for office, the calls came to me again. I was very pleased. Who knew that the class of Fleming would end up benefiting on such a major level from an error on my part? I am a Christian. I let people assume what they want to assume. I do. But I'm proud of my name. It means servant of peace. So whenever that question came up and they said, but you're a Muslim, and I'm going, why do you think that? There's an opportunity to teach. There's an opportunity to learn. And so I'm very proud of the way that you've done your business. I think that you will represent all of the people. I think you have a unique perspective that because I have the perspective that others don't have. Not only was I married to a Muslim, I lived in a Muslim country for several years. That adds to what you can do and what you understand. And when they start talking about the terrorists, and I'm on all kinds of lists, you know, just because of my name, it really does give you an awesome responsibility. I'm very glad to pass that over to you. I'm very glad to pass that over to you, but you know, look, behind you, I even did Hannity and Combs, man. I'm doing national news, you know, I'm doing, but the thing is that even in my district and in the state of Georgia, because of the name, not because of my faith, but simply because of the name, I have support from the Orthodox Muslims, the Sunni Muslims, the American Muslims, the Nation of Islam, just because. And it really is an opportunity to do some different stuff and to bring some different perspectives and to represent some other people that absolutely need the representation. So I know that you will go forth and do it well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm Jessica Farrar, state rep from Texas, and it was really refreshing to hear you speaking about the military budget. On opening day, I'm also a board member of Will Wand, and so I'm hoping that you'll spend some time to visit with our lobbyists who will be there on opening day to talk about a little bit further about what we could do, especially in areas where we're spending still money on obsolete weapons and so on, when it's a lot of money that could go into the idea of there is enough for everybody, healthcare, housing, education, and so on. So I would just encourage you to learn more about what we're trying to do and changing the mindset of this country.
I'd be honored.
Meg Burton Cahill, Arizona State Legislature, and also did a Kennedy class with the good congressman. I guess I'm interested in whether or not this Congress that we are about to begin will look at some of the long-term infrastructure issues in the United States that I think have been decades in growing, and something that is not a flashy thing, it's not a sexy thing, but I think it is something that affects many people on many levels. And I guess I'd just like to publicly ask you to use your Fleming Foundation, your Kennedy School Foundation, and really look at some of the long-term infrastructure areas so that we could prevent issues like what happened to New Orleans.
Yep.
And other issues that are just waiting to happen across this country.
Well, you can bet on that, and I tell you, with Jim Oberstar as the head of Transportation and Infrastructure, who is the congressman from Minnesota, he's committed to building up this country, right? And so I think that you got my promise to work on that, and I know you're going to be working right alongside, but I think the future's bright for that. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Kristen Lindquist, former staff member for CPA and a trainer for Fleming. First of all, congratulations, Keith. And
Thank you.
I have two questions for you that I'm very curious about and I think might be helpful to other people. One of my personal passions is building the pipeline, so I'd like to hear about who took your seat. And my other question is, what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be for yourself personally in the Congress? And what kind of advice, one piece of advice would you give to people who are looking to run for Congress?
Good. All three good questions. Willie Dominguez is the fellow who's taken over House District 58B. Talented guy, a lot of grassroots connections, and he's going to need your help, Kirsten. So, if he doesn't have the time or awareness to call you, just call him. And he's a good guy, and I'm looking forward to him to be really successful. As it relates to advice for people looking to run for Congress, I would say wholeheartedly that, first of all, that as a state legislator, what you're doing is equally important, just as important. I don't regard me going to Congress as a promotion of any kind, but at the same time, if it's your desire to work on national issues, then we need your help. And that I would say, first, just to keep it real for a minute, look in your own private personal inventory. If you got any unpaid parking tickets or anything, definitely deal with all that. Know that people who operate on the politics of fear, all they can really do is try to tear you down. And so you're not going to avoid them talking bad about you, but don't give them any sticks to hit you in the head with. You know what I mean? Don't make it easy for them. And then also, be real clear that in this age where negative campaigning is so important to people, that it's really not, they're not dogging you. They're really trying to stop an agenda that you're carrying. So don't take it personally. Don't allow yourself the petty indulgence of striking back, right? Stay firm, stay clear, stay focused, and remember that you're sticking up for a lot of people who aren't being heard, and if you falter, then they won't be heard, and so it really is a thing like that. Now, the middle question you asked me, I lost track of. Personal challenge. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you guys again. Organization. That's why I got Kari Moe over there to help me get organized. Say hi to Kari, everybody. Kari's our chief of staff, and there's so many things going on, so much. A lot of calls, a lot of emails, a lot of messages, a lot of very important events that are going on that we get invitations to, that I'd love to do all of them, but we just cannot do all of them. All this stuff, and you still have to try to do excellent constituent services, have a presence in the district, and stand up for the values people sent you there to uphold. And that could be a daunting challenge. For me, my biggest challenge is to make sure that I tighten it up, keep it focused. And then, of course, another personal challenge for me is, I'm sorry, but, I don't like to tell people no, And it's not that I'm a people pleaser. It's not that I, fear that they're not going to like me. I don't really care if they do or don't. But I want people to see their dreams fulfilled. I want to see people get what they want out of life, and I just really feel that, I'd love to see us all succeed, so I have a problem of overcommitting. And so, that's going to be her job to help me not do that, too. So, there you go.
We have time for one more question.
Okay. Really quick. It's kind of a two-part, but I'll make it very quick. My name is Angeline Fraser, and I am the organizing director for Families Against Mandatory Minimums here in Washington, D.C. And my question is, one, what do you feel about mandatory minimums? We're 20 years past Len Bias dying and these drastic laws that have taken over our country that now have 2.3 million people in this country incarcerated, not just on drugs, but 2.3 million people are incarcerated. What do you feel about mandatory minimums? Can we talk to you about them? Because we really do need to change them. And then the second question is, I was in a session earlier today about the divestiture in Sudan. It was an excellent session, and I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on about that.
Well, when it comes to mandatory minimum sentencing, I'm an opponent of mandatory minimum sentencing. I think that judges and juries together with under a clear and fair legal scheme are quite capable of sentencing people properly. You know, I've seen too many cases where a young woman signs for a FedEx box and ends up with 10 years. Mm-hmm. You know, and just really it's been devastating. It hasn't made our country safer. It hasn't made our country more drug-free. At $40,000 per person per cell, we can do better when we know treatment you can pretty much is effective at $4 grand a year. So, I mean, it really is time to say that we cannot conceive of this drug epidemic as a war. It's a bad metaphor to begin with. We need to look at it as a public health crisis, and we need to look at trying to get people healed up and cleaned up. Now, of course, people who use guns and sell dope and traffic, you know, they're in a different category for me, but I think the overwhelming number of people who are occupying our federal prisons and our state prisons are people who really, on drug offenses based on mandatory minimums, they don't need to be there. And I think that it's a waste of a human resource, certainly a waste of state and federal budgets, and we need to look at this thing all over again. And in that connection, I mean, I'm concerned about the length of time some of these nonviolent drug offenders get, but I'm also concerned about what happens when they get out of jail. We need to really think about prisoner reentry, how to get people back into society, be successful. I don't care how, I mean, me and a hardcore conservative might disagree on the war on drugs. I know we would, but maybe we wouldn't. But on the issue of reentry, I can't conceive of how we could have a disagreement because no one has an interest in somebody reoffending, right? And so we should all agree that reentry services are an important thing and that people who, you know, get out of prison we need to try to make them successful. As it relates to Darfur, you know, it's a horrible human tragedy and the United States should be about the business of promoting peace and should use the tools available to promote peace there. I want to learn a lot more about the divestiture movement. I wasn't able to be in that seminar, but I am very concerned about Darfur and Africa generally, and so I'd be hopeful that you could help me become better educated on that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this portion of our event. We want to thank you all so much for coming and for coming out for Center for Policy Alternatives Annual Summit of the States. And I'm now going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Tim McFeely.
Thank you. Thank you all. And let me express my personal appreciation and that of the staff and the board to both Helen and Keith. You know, we could have done Judy Garland and, you know, been here all night and sung them all. But thank you, and good luck. And as many people have said, we are very, very proud of you. It's just great. It's just great. Final housekeeping announcement. The buses will be out front for those people who are relying on buses to take them to the airport at 3 p.m., which is 10 minutes from now, and they depart from the hotel at 3:15. Okay? So most of you are ready to rock anyway. So they'll be there at 3, and you can get on, and people will be departing at 3:15. Are there any questions about things people need? Okay, great. Well, I hope you will all come back next year, and I hope that, and I know that when we do reassemble at this hotel on December 7th in 2007 for our 11th Summit on the State, that we are going to celebrate many, hundreds, if not thousands, of progressive victories in every single state in this country, because you and your colleagues out there are going to make enormous, enormous changes. I can just sense it in the air. We know the public wants it. We know that you're ready to do it. As Keith has said, and as our speakers yesterday, in particular, John Lewis, Keith said, be bold. John Lewis said, get in the way. So go get in the way.
When do you go back? You back today? Oh.
Sunday on Afterward.